Let's talk about how to apply quality peer-reviewed science to your day and how to optimize everything from sleep to learning, creativity, meal timing, etc. What we are talking about today are really basic things that we can all do that can steer our neurology and our biology in the directions that are going to support workflow, that are going to support hormones, that are going to support brain function. It's actually the case that every cell in our body, every organ in our body, and our brain is modulated or changes across the 24-hour day in a very regular and predictable rhythm. I tend to wake up sometime around 6 a.m., 6:30. The first thing I do after I wake up is I take the pen that's on my nightstand and the pad of paper on my nightstand, and I write down the time in which I woke up. The reason for writing down what time I wake up is because I want to know what's called my temperature minimum. The second thing I do after I wake up is to get into forward ambulation, which is just nerd speak for taking a walk. There's a phenomenon whereby when we generate our own forward motion, forward ambulation, visual images pass by us on our eyes, so-called optic flow. Experiencing visual flow has a powerful effect on the nervous system. The effect it has is essentially to quiet or reduce the amount of neural activity in this brain structure called the amygdala. And many of you have probably heard about the amygdala for its role in anxiety and fear and threat detection. And indeed, the amygdala is part of the network in the brain that generates feelings of fear and threat and anxiety. It does a bunch of other things too, but that's one of its primary functions. Forward ambulation, walking or biking or running, and generating optic flow in particular, has this incredible property of lowering activity in the amygdala and thereby reducing levels of anxiety. That walk is a particularly important protocol each day because it really serves to push my neurology in the direction that I'd like it to go, which is alert but not anxious. So now we have a first protocol, which is to write down the time of day that you wake up. The second protocol is to take a walk first thing in the morning. I'm a big believer, based on quality peer-reviewed data, that hydration is essential for mental performance. As many of you know, neurons require ionic flow. What that means is neurons need sodium, they need magnesium, and they need potassium in order to function. We do tend to get dehydrated at night. I try and make sure that I'm hydrated early in the day before I begin any work. So I make myself drink this water with a little bit of sea salt. At that point, I start craving caffeine, but I don't drink that caffeine yet. I purposely delay my caffeine intake to 90 minutes to 120 minutes after I wake up. The reason I delay caffeine is because one of the factors that induces a sense of sleepiness is the buildup of adenosine. The reason for delaying caffeine intake 90 minutes to 2 hours after waking is I want to make sure that I don't have a late afternoon or even early afternoon crash from caffeine. I've talked before about the fact that when our eyes are directed upward, it creates a state of heightened alertness. Try and position your screen or your tablet, whatever device you happen to be working on, at least at eye level, and ideally slightly higher. When we look down, when our eyelids are slightly closed, it tends to decrease our levels of alertness and increase our levels of sleepiness. So we're now at the description of my day and these protocols in which I would do a 90-minute bout of work. Now, why 90 minutes? Well, the brain is going through these 90-minute so-called ultradian cycles throughout the entire day and night. Every 90 minutes, we shift over from being very alert to being less alert and then back to alert again. My phone is absolutely off. It's not on airplane mode. It's absolutely off during this time. In addition, I use low-level white noise. Turned on at a low volume puts the brain into a state that's optimal for learning and workflow. You have access to a very important piece of data that dictates when this bout should start, more or less, and when it should end. That piece of data is your temperature minimum. If you're somebody who wakes up on average at 7 a.m., well, then your temperature minimum is 5 a.m. You can be reasonably sure that your best work is going to be done anywhere from 4 to 6 hours after your temperature minimum. What you're trying to do in this idea of optimizing this 90-minute work bout to a particular time of day is catch the portion of the steepest slope of that temperature rise. Data going back to the 1990s supports the idea that physical movement of particular kinds can support brain health and brain function, both in the immediate term and in the long term. So after I've finished a bout of work, this 90-minute bout of work, I force myself to do some sort of physical exercise that is going to be supportive of my brain health and brain function and organ health and bodily function in general. First is strength and hypertrophy work. There's also endurance work, physical exercise and movements that are designed to allow you to do more work over time, or to extend the amount of time that you can do work of any kind. Approximately 80% of the resistance training you do should be resistance training that doesn't go to what they call failure, where you can't actually move the resistance anymore. My primary objective early in the day is to get into a mode of being focused yet alert so that I can get work done. I found that the best way for me to achieve that state is through fasting. So I don't eat anything until about 11 a.m. or 12 noon. Fasting increases levels of adrenaline. In its optimal range, adrenaline really provides a heightened sense of focus and the ability to encode, meaning bring in and retain, remember information. The volume of food is also important. If you eat a large volume of anything, because it diverts blood to your gut, you will feel lethargic and you will have less blood going to your brain. So for lunch, I do emphasize slightly lower carbohydrate or low carbohydrate intake. A key aspect to the midday meal is to take a brief walk afterwards. It turns out that brief walks of 5 to 30 minutes after ingesting food can accelerate metabolism and actually can accelerate and improve nutrient utilization. A key protocol for sleep health and wakefulness and metabolism and hormone health is viewing light in the afternoon. What it does is it lowers the sensitivity of your retina in the late evening hours, which allows you to buffer yourself against the negative effects of bright light later at night. So my dinner generally is comprised of things that are going to support rest and deep sleep. And that means starchy carbohydrates. It's absolutely clear that one of the major ways that we can increase serotonin, which helps in the transition to sleep, is by ingesting starchy carbohydrates. So let's talk about sleep and how to access sleep. One way to do that is to leverage the drop in temperature that's necessary to fall and stay asleep. And one way to accelerate that drop in temperature, somewhat counterintuitively, is to use hot baths, hot showers, or if you have access to one, a sauna. It is absolutely true that keeping the room very dark is beneficial. The other thing is keeping the room cool. 3 compounds that can be very beneficial for aiding the transition to sleep and for which there are wide safety margins, although please do check with your physician before taking anything, are specific forms of magnesium, something called apigenin and theanine. What we are talking about today are really basic things that we can all do that can steer our neurology and our biology in the directions that are going to support workflow, that are going to support hormones, that are going to support brain function.